Thank you to everyone who signed on so far. We're going to give everyone another moment or two to join, but feel free, if in the interim, if you'd like to, break out the chat function. Feel free to let us know where you're joining from today, institution, location. If you're working remotely like me today, let us know where you're coming from, and we look forward to the conversation. So we'll get started shortly. Thanks. One thing I will ask for my fellow panelists and perhaps Wallace from NASPAA here is as we go through, if questions come up in the chat, I have too many screens and tabs open in my brain right now to be able to see that. So if folks can just keep an eye on that as we go through, that would be super helpful. Thanks. And we'll give everyone another minute or two to sign on, but we want to respect everyone's time who's here promptly, right, for 1 Eastern. So we'll get going shortly. All right. Well, for the sake of time, we'll get started. And as other attendees join us, they can jump into the conversation. And again, we will be recording this session today with the collaboration of NASPAA. So thanks to staff for helping on that front. And we'll do our best to share a copy of the recording once it's available and a copy of the slides. So if anybody needs the content later on, just know you will receive a copy of it. It will be later accessible. So no need to frantically jot down notes or screenshots if you don't need to. So welcome, everyone. My name is Ryan Baldessario. I work at the University of Connecticut up in Hartford, Connecticut, in the U.S. And welcome to our NASPAA Student Services Committee webinar today, Approaches to Supporting International Students at U.S.-Based Institutions. Before we get any further, I'm going to have each of my colleagues introduce themselves, our fellow panelists. So we'll go Michelle, Rachel, and CJ following the slides. So if you folks can, please just introduce yourself and let our attendees know where you're coming from.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for being with us today. I'm Michelle Lurch. I serve as the director of the Master's Programs Office at the Paul H. O'Neill School of Public and Environmental Affairs at Indiana University Bloomington, located in Bloomington, Indiana.
All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Rachel Dubois. I'm the Director of Career Services at NYU Wagner, and my office serves all current Wagner students, all 865 of them, and all 15,000 alumni free for life. So happy to be here with you today and talk about how we support international students.
Good morning, everyone. It's still morning here in California. I am CJ Jones. I am our Senior Director of Student Services here at the Pepperdine School of Public Policy. So I work with our international students throughout the cycle from recruitment on to alumni. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, folks. And we do have NASPAA staff member Wallace Grant with us today. So Wallace will be helping us with, again, some of the administrative functions of the session, trying to help with answering any questions in the chat. We'll make sure that we have time. So just as a walkthrough of what we're going through today, we do have a quick, obviously we just did our intros here. We want to talk about supporting international students from a few different perspectives, the kind of communications you might have pre-arrival before students get to campus. As they first arrive, what are we doing to set them up for success in orientation and other programming? While students are currently in programs throughout that life cycle, what are we doing to support them? What are their experiences like? And then also a little bit on the career side, not necessarily post-graduation career placements. That's a whole other conversation for another day. We'll touch on that briefly. But then we really wanted to open up for conversation at the end of this after we go through some of our content areas. So please, if you have questions throughout, throw them in the chat so that we have a chance to address them. We might be able to periodically pause and stop for questions if there's anything that's really bubbling up that needs to be addressed in the moment. But the whole second half of this presentation is designed to be a conversation, allow groups to ask questions, to hear from each other, share best practices, and see what we can do to support our students joining us from outside the United States. So, quick poll. So this is not a formal Mentimeter poll or anything like that, but we want to just hear from our attendees. So in the chat, you have the ability to enter a combination of numbers 1, 2, 3, or 4, or A, B, C, D, and E. So we want to ask, like, how soon are you really communicating with those incoming international students for your program? Is that as soon as they submit a deposit? Is it wait like just a few weeks before they arrive? Thinking about your role in particular, maybe not your entire institution or your entire program, but you as an individual, when are you communicating with these international students? And then when you are doing that communication, what platforms are you using? What methods? So feel free to use a combination. So if you are a 1, C, feel free to do that. If you are a combination of everything, throw some of that alphanumeric combinations in the chat for us. All right. So let's see here. 3, 1, 3, 1, E, 1, A. All right. Pretty good mix of combos. Let's see here. I'm mostly... All right, give everyone another moment to enter that. But the whole point of asking that question is for us to really get a sense that we all do this in slightly different ways. Sometimes it may depend on our roles, may depend on our institutions, may depend on who we're communicating with and what part of the world our students are coming from. So thank you for engaging on that front. Sorry, my cursor, there we go. All right, so CJ, take it away with some of this content about some of the work we do with our students pre-arrival.
Thank you, Ryan. We'll just start with the key takeaway, right? These pre-arrival resources that all of us are sharing, and to build relationships, they are crucial, right? And pairing them with the early semester structured transition programs, coaching, mentorship, those all help to support belonging within our communities, persistence, graduation, and ultimately academic confidence, right? Welcoming them into our campus communities, whether that be in person or online or some sort of hybrid. And so that's very important. So we just wanted to start off with that statement. And then certainly building contact patterns outside of the admissions formalities, right, as they are preparing to arrive at our universities and colleges. And so making sure that they're understanding, the visa process, right, once an I-20 is issued, checking in advance for various types of documentation requests along the way. Now, for most of us, that those compliance requests go through our international support offices, whatever they may be called on our campuses. But we can still help support those students through that process and reminders, working with our international student support teams to make sure that those students do feel supported and that they're meeting those deadlines that are set up for them along that path. This also helps build relationships again and minimize melt. If you're in constant communication with these students, then the expectation for them to arrive and become part of that community is set early on before they get here. And so that certainly will help with those instances where you might not hear from a student and they just never show up, right? Or sometimes you don't hear from them and then they just appear at orientation unexpectedly, right? And so it's good to keep those communication channels open and rigorously communicating with them along the way. And so I'll turn it over to Ryan for some funding guidance.
Thank you, CJ. So on top of that regular and constant and consistent communication with some of these incoming students, again, primarily whether they're international students or domestic students, that communication is essential. But for our international students in particular, we want to keep in mind some of the context that they're entering that may differentiate them from some of our other students. And one key factor of that is that financial declaration step of the I-20 process. So I don't know how all of you may or may not be working in the depths of the behind the scenes of your F1 or J1 visa student support. I used to have to do a lot of this when I was at a previous institution, a different part of the university, not necessarily in the NASPAA part of the school, but mostly with our school business students. And a lot of it was coming down to funding. And the financial declaration page standards are really, they can feel really arbitrary. And sometimes for our incoming students, they need some help kind of demystifying or understanding why certain thresholds are met. So if you look through your institution's kind of I-20 guidance website, if they exist, right, they'll essentially describe why this certain threshold of funding that exists and why it's that way. So it's not just the cost of attendance for tuition and room and board if applicable, but it's everything else. It's the living expenses, travel expenses, making sure that students can actually support themselves while they travel to the United States. And that threshold can be pretty difficult to obtain depending on where your students are being sourced from, where they're traveling to, where their own personal financial and personal circumstances, right? So having at least a general understanding of that process to be able to help students is really important. There are times when a student may have all the proof that they need on the financial side to show that they have personal savings, income, whatever they might need to verify their visa process. They might still need additional documents from your university or institution to help them. I don't know, again, some institutions have different rules and regulations about what that looks like, but I've written dozens of letters on our university and our school specific letterhead describing, hey, yes, this is a student. They are designed to come into our program. They have the ability to opt into these types of employment opportunities and these types of funding opportunities in the future. It's not confirmed yet because that's later in the program, but here's some of the details, hoping to help the students be successful in that visa process. So even if it's not something that you regularly do, you might be able to go out of your way to help a student if they come to you with specific requests like that. It's always good to have, whether it's on a website, a one-pager, an info session that you might run, having clear guidelines about what employment opportunities may be eligible for international students and which ones aren't. So clarifying, hey, if you want to be a graduate assistant, does your unit have those opportunities? Is there a specific application process? Go and understand that. You are going to most likely have to, maybe not language-wise translate this, but you're going to have to provide context and explain the behind the scenes of these processes to students who may not be familiar with your institution. So knowing at least generally how those processes work is important. And knowing, so say for student employment as an example, F1 visa students are eligible to work on campus while they're doing their academic programs, but they can't get a part-time job at a pizza place off campus, right? So knowing some of those general things so that you can at least give general advice to students. You're not the only resource for that advice, but telling students what they need to know and what they have to avoid getting in, setting real expectations for being able to afford their experience while they're here. And see whether or not your institution has any sort of flexibility on programs that typically may not be available to international students. One minor example is that at our institution, we've worked with our International Student Support Office to essentially have documentation that allows our first year students to participate in some internship programs that typically aren't available to F1 students until at least a year of study. So just exploring what, if any, flexibility may exist in your institution will be helpful because your incoming students aren't going to know the gatekeepers and the resources and the locations for those answers. So you're going to have to do the extra steps to help them in that front. All right. So thinking about we retained students, we got them through the visa acquisition process, they've traveled, they've confirmed their arrival, they are about to enter our campuses. Now we have to figure out how to set them up for success. Going back to that chat function, if you can, does your institution host anything specific for F1 or J1 visa students for your incoming students? Please A, B, C, or D. Okay, see a lot of A's, that's good. All right, well, added context here. For those of you that are putting A as your answer, or C, right? How directly involved is your unit to those orientations? Do you have any say in how they're run? Do you support them at all? Or do you just tell your students they have to go to them? It's run by some other part of the institution. You just reinforce that they need to go. If you could put in the chat, do you have any say in that process? Or is it just through perhaps your international students office?
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. No, just the students. Okay. Oh, yeah, there you go, CJ. Thank you. Yeah, so yes, we may have specific orientations, but how topically salient is it to our programs? Or is it just, hey, this is the bare minimum expectations for funding, for hoops, how to maintain your I-20? Is there any way for us to help spot them? So, interesting. Nice, Laura. Thank you. All right, so moving on. Passport to Pepperdine is a great example of this. CJ, please take it away.
All right. Thank you again, Ryan. So here I'm going to talk a little bit about our Passport to Pepperdine, our new student arrival guide, and some enhancements that we currently do at the School Public Policy, and then what we're planning to bring on next fall, actually. And so the university does provide a comprehensive system to help our internationals transition very smoothly, we hope, to the United States and then thrive academically, socially, and personally. So our what we call Office of International Student Services, OISS, is our primary hub for international student support. That obviously assists with everything related to visa issues, compliance, travel guidance for students when they get here, CPT, OPT, social security letters to get employment on campus, program extensions, and then certainly arrival reporting as well. They also do extensive pre-arrival information as far as one-on-one advising to help support students understand U.S. systems and university expectations as an F1 student. We don't host J students here at Pepperdine. And then so our passport to Pepperdine, this is again our pre-arrival guide. So we get this out to our international students beginning in the summer before their arrival, typically in August. And so this covers everything from airport transportation to hotel options if they are going to be, taking their coming in late or early, depending upon the time of day and when housing is available to meet them if they're living on campus. Also has off-campus housing support and meal plan information, grocery store information, and then guidance on transportation, right? That's important. So whether that's a shuttle, ride share, and then eventually how to secure a California driver's license and then even purchase a vehicle, right? So we do try to ensure that this means that they can function properly and confidently here in Malibu and during their stay. And then we also include robust health and safety support. So this is information about health insurance, the required health insurance, access to our student health center, 24/7 virtual care options that we have for our students, immunization guidance, and then wellness resources as well. And that even includes an introduction to our Department of Public Safety, our Live Safe app, so that they can get shuttle escorts in the evening, and just understanding the campus structure and what it means if there's an emergency or if they need that support. And then certainly our passport to Pepperdine also introduces these students to the range of services that can help support them academically and emotionally, and what we through our RISE program, we call the 6 dimensions of support. So the Counseling Center for Emotional and Mental Health Support, we certainly have seen an instance, a rise in those students, whether they don't having trouble adapting or missing home if they're coming to the United States brand new as a graduate student in our program. Our accessibility office as well, campus recreation, right, to give them that support and for activities to do, because Malibu's, a small beach town, so it's we don't even have a target here. Library information, spiritual life programs and resources here at Pepperdine, and then even arts and theater access as well. Different enrollment services, payment options, student accounts, different documentation, mail services even for them to receive arriving packages, tech support, and then our own Pepperdine app that helps them navigate throughout that process. And then there's also information on banking and credit and mobile phone setup, Wi-Fi information. So we try to be as comprehensive as possible to help those students adjust and understand, cultural, if they're new to the United States and campus life. And so that's our full support services that the university offers through this passport to Pepperdine. And then here at the School of Public Policy, within our new student orientation, we offer 2 specific sessions for F1 students that focuses on the expectations as an MPP student, the academic requirements for the program, SPP culture, advising, and student life, student organizations. And these also include our student ambassadors. They're an important part of our campus life and support. They reach out to all incoming students and even prospective students. It's been a great program that we established several years ago. If you don't have ambassadors in your admissions offices or in your student services office, you should really look at finding a way to develop a program like that. It has done so much good for us here at the School of Public Policy. And that also includes coaching and then student services and advising support through me in my office. And then we're really excited to announce that next fall, we're developing basically this 6-module workshop series over the first 8 weeks of the semester that will just continue to check in on them formally, offer support, mentorship, see how they're adapting to campus life here. And we've really recognize that, yes, it's important for the pre-arrival and it's important for the orientation, but we're really trying to see how this can just increase belonging and support here at the university and specifically the School of Public Policy. And if that works, we'll look at seeing what we can do about even expanding that beyond that, this new 6-week 8-module program. So that's just a little bit about what we do here at the School of Public Policy and the university through Office of International Student Services to help support students as they arrive and throughout orientation and as a student here. So I'll send it back to Ryan.
Thank you, CJ. We're going to move on over to jumpstarting the NYU Wagner classroom experience. So Rachel, please.
Yeah, thank you so much. So once again, I'm Rachel Dubois. I'm the Director of Career Services at NYU Wagner. NYU is unique in that we have the most international students of any college or university in the US. So we have significant infrastructure at NYU to help students with the visa processes, getting settled in New York, all of the great stuff that Ryan and CJ were just talking about. But how do you move here? How do you get set up? How do you get your grounding? But what we have seen in the past several years at NYU Wagner is that there's a disconnect for some of our international students between their undergrad experience in other countries and the expectations of being in an American classroom. And one of our clinical faculty members launched a program in fall 2024 called Jumpstarting the Wagner Classroom Experience. It's a week-long non-credit course offered to all incoming students. Everyone can attend, but it's required for students who did not complete their bachelor's degree at a 4-year institution in the US. It is the week before classes officially start. So we let students know you need to set up your visa and your housing and your arrangements to be in the country. And then the course itself covers a lot of things that we heard from faculty that their international students were struggling with. So the norms of the American classroom, knowing that you can talk back to your professors and debate and speak up in class. They talk to students about what those expectations are. There's an overview of US governance. I'm an American citizen, and there are still things I find complicated and complex and hard to understand about our government. But for international students, it can feel like you're walking into a brand new world. And so there's an overview of political institutions, policy, as well as the US nonprofit sector, because we are the School of Public Service. We do a lot of teamwork at Wagner, a lot of group-based projects. Their capstone is group-based. So there's a module all about teamwork and working in teams, understanding your role on a team. There's a focus on communication skills, as well as conversations about ethical use of AI. And then there's also a student and alumni Ask Me Anything panel. We'll bring in Wagner students specifically, international, either current international students or alum, to answer questions of the students. I think in fall 2024, when we launched, I believe we had about 90 incoming F1 students to our program. No, excuse me. This past year we had 90. The year in fall 2024 we had 120. We've had about a 70% attendance rate at these programs. We say it's required. Nothing actually happens to you if you don't come to these, but the students don't know that. And so we set it up as an expectation that this is going to be the way that you will learn about success in a US graduate classroom. So I did want to share that information with you, and I'm happy to answer any questions about it at the end, as well as the other supports that Wagner provides. But I will turn it back over to Ryan.
Thank you, Rachel. All right. So we've talked about setting the stage for students as they come into the programs, but when they're actively here, they've got a semester or so under their belt. What are we doing to adequately support them? So figuring now, I'm pivoting over to that side. Looking at this poll in the chat, please, what kind of continuous resources do you, thinking about you as an individual or your unit perhaps, what do you provide to your international students? Do you do just purely academic advising? Or do you do any sort of direct immigration advising or consulting? Do you help plan those student events? Are you connecting them to university resources? Or is it a hodgepodge of all those above? Let us know what you do in your roles. Okay. Right. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, there's not as many of us that do both academic advising and a combination of these things. So I'm glad to see that there's a good mix, but I'm glad to see there's combinations as well. And that's obviously going to vary by institution. So let's go into some more specific examples and we'll talk about, from Michelle's perspective of what we do to support our F1 students. So go ahead, Michelle.
All right, thank you so much, Ryan. And again, my name is Michelle Lurch. I'm coming from the O'Neill School at Indiana University, Bloomington. And I'm just going to share a little bit about some of the in-program resources that our school provides to our international students that really serve as kind of an expansion of what they learn and what they experience during orientation, to ensure that we are offering continued support and guidance to make sure that they're successful as they work through our programs. So from the academic side, we work in a centralized versus decentralized international student advising model. And I'll talk a little bit about what I mean by that. So from an academic perspective, academic advising for us is facilitated through the academic department. And that is true of all schools and departments across Indiana University. So our academic and faculty advisors are the ones helping students ensure that they're meeting degree requirements, making adequate academic progress. But our immigration advising, I think similarly to a lot of other institutions, is done centrally through our Office of International Services. And those of us who work really closely with our current international students in our programs know that some of these lines can be a little gray between what an academic advisor can share with a student from an academic perspective versus how that may impact their immigration status, which would be something that would be facilitated through an advisor in the Office of International Services. So it's really important that if you have a model where there are multiple advisors who are helping to support the student, that you work really, really closely together and collaborate because it's not as clear as your academic advisor is going to help you select your classes and help you meet degree requirements versus your international advisor is going to help you make sure that you are in compliance with your immigration requirements. So just really important that those lines are really solid in order to be able to best support the students. Then I want to talk a little bit about a resource that we provide similarly to what CJ shared that they do at Pepperdine, but we have a site that we call the Current Student Portal that all of our students have access to, but there is a specific portion of that that is dedicated just to international student services that really provides a one-stop shop for the international student experience, provides them with a lot of resources, like CJ said, on housing and finding grocery stores and how to use the bus system, how to get a bank account, how to buy a cell phone, all those different types of things. And it was actually, from a content perspective, put together by our current international students. So we essentially went and asked them, what are the things that were most important to you that maybe we as US citizens don't realize because it's really intuitive to us. What are the things that would be really helpful to you? And they helped us really craft that content. And we've gotten really good feedback from our international students on how helpful and beneficial that is to have access to not only when they start their program, but the whole time while they're here with us. We also have a graduate assistant that is dedicated to helping coordinate programming for our international students. And we have found that that has been a really good model because we see that our students respond well to each other. So this particular graduate assistant can keep a pretty good pulse on, what are the current needs of international students, how are those needs changing, and what do we need to do in order to be able to meet that need and ensure that those students are accommodated. So our current graduate assistant facilitates tours around town. So what are the good places to eat? What are the sites to see on campus that are places the students really enjoy? He facilitates group trips to the farmers market that happens when the weather is nice here. So things like that to just help to build some community among our international students, but done on a student-to-student level. Also helps to link to on and off-campus resources as part of that current student portal. and then just ensure that our students know what's going on in the school, as well as at the larger IU community. So if you don't have anything in place where students can kind of go for these resources on a continual basis, I really recommend it. And then, the second piece, I know CJ mentioned about the importance of having an ambassador program, if that's something that you can do. Just a second, that it's been invaluable for us, to leverage our current students in helping us, one, provide content to students that we know is going to be helpful to them, but two, help us make sure that our continued resources are actually meeting the need of our current students. So I'll turn it back to you, Ryan.
Thank you, Michelle. All right. So this is my part of the program here, and I'll explain my role and context in a moment. But before I do, for those of you that do any sort of career services in your role, what kind of career resources do you provide to your international students? Do you do any sort of coaching? Do you assist in the administration or running of those CPT and OPT workshops? Do you do any sort of identity-specific programming for those students on the mentoring side? Do you help them with their actual materials, going global, all those kind of things? Tell me in the chat what you do. I see a lot of Fs, which normally would be a bad sign, but I'm glad to see that there's a lot of Fs in this answer. Good. All right. So let's talk about it. I am Ryan Baldessari, again, as I mentioned before. I am the Director of Engagement at the UConn School of Public Policy. And what that means, it's a convoluted title, but really I oversee our student internship programs, our outreach efforts, and I also am our de facto career services person who provides all of these career services to our students. And in doing that, I have to leverage some of my past experience because admittedly, our program in particular is smaller in terms of the amount of F1 students that join our programs. So in any given year, we have probably, again, it really depends, but especially now in the last few years with changes to up and down in visa processing, with the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, a variety of different other factors, I think our current public policy programs only have a maximum of like 5 F1 students in a given year, which is, again, paltry compared to places like NYU Wagner and other folks like that. But I used to work in a business context with students on the MBA side, and we are working with about 50% of our program as international students. So I've had some experiences, not just in NASPAA context, but outside of that too. And you'll see this from your admissions folks. So trying to, if you are on the career services side or you wear many different hats and this is just a part of your role, try to understand what the admissions team is seeing in the application side and looking at those details. Because more often than not, depending on where students are coming from, their home countries may, just by standard, use curriculum vitae or CVs as opposed to resumes. And those may not always, fit well into, it's a square peg to a round hole, if you will, for certain application procedures within the United States. And some of our international students may have a tendency to say, hey, you know what? Everything I've ever done, let me put this in this document. And that will show how qualified I am for some of these positions. And then the hard part is actually saying, well, we may not have the luxury of time, and CVs aren't necessarily the standard. So let's try to, demystify that process a little bit for you. Let's try and set you up for success given the context that you're entering. So it's really just scaling down language, changing formatting, really trying to just give tangible examples to the students and walking them through how to effectively translate the great content experience they already have into a more kind of standard resume digestible format that may better fit into the post-graduation career context they're going for. Let's see here. Yes. So understanding CPT and pre-OPT processes. We're not going to talk about OPT and post-graduation just because, again, that could be an entire hour-long plus conversation. That is primarily handled through international student offices just because they are the best working knowledge of those federal policies.
Yeah.
And we don't necessarily directly support those processes. So we're going to talk about CPT and pre-OPT because those are inherently linked to academic programs. So CPT is curricular practical training, and pre-OPT is pre-graduation, pre-completion, optional practical training. Say that 5 times fast, right? Now, those programs are usually, there's different hoops and restrictions. So if you are a career services professional and you're trying to promote opportunities to students, you have to recognize that some of your students, from an equity perspective, may not be able to pursue those opportunities. If there are roles that are short-term and don't meet enough of a criteria for them to earn academic credit, and there's not some sort of either non-credit or alternative within an academic requirement for a student to do an internship, then a lot of those international students probably aren't going to be eligible for that. part-time mini consulting type projects that your community partners might come to you with. Again, unless it's through some sort of student club volunteering effort, there's some gray area there. Those students may not be eligible. So just understanding the kind of requirements that your institutions set forth for those students to earn the ability to have work authorization for CPT and pre-OPT. CPT is usually done a lot more in-house with institutions specifically. Pre-OPT does have a federal link to it, but there are some steps. So you don't need to be an expert. Obviously, we're not the only resource for students to navigate these processes, but like go to your institutional web pages and see what the steps are. Have at least a bare minimum working knowledge. Know where that link is, know how to find it, be able to review that with students so that they don't feel alone in that process and that you're better prepared to actually support them. You may not be answering specific questions, but you at least know, hey, you know what you should do in advance? Make sure you have that CPT checked off. Make sure let's do that in the middle of the fall semester. If you're starting in January, let's take care of that all in advance. You understanding at least roughly some of those timelines will be really pivotal to your students. Again, same thing with the work authorization on I-20, being able to tell students what they can and cannot do, or at least giving them guidance generally, ultimately is going to be their decision. If they make violations of their current immigration status or their work authorization, or if they make steps and mistakes, you advise them as best you can. Ultimately, we can't control all these people are adults. They're going to do what they do, but it's good to do your best to offer those reminders and trying to provide things that allow students to get those experiences that may not need all of the hoops and administrative processes for CPT. As an example, you may not be able to have an international student or a group of first semester international students do any sort of internships for a professional experience because of CPT restrictions, but you might be able to do some more kind of on-site career events where students are able to shadow some of those experiences, but it's not a one-on-one. The students aren't necessarily providing a service. That still gives that student or those groups of students exposure to that content, allows them to expand their professional network and gain some tangible experience, even if they're not doing hands-on work. And you're doing so in a way that doesn't violate any sort of statuses that they have to be considerate of. So those are some creative ways you could potentially do that if you don't have the ability to support students for specific career opportunities while they're a student. Really explore the academic steps for some of these internship programs. Again, typically speaking, it's generally students aren't able to do CPT, whether they're an undergrad or a graduate student, until at least they complete at least one academic year at their institution. Now, that's not one calendar year, that's two, like a fall and a spring semester. Universities that are on quarter systems, I'm a little less knowledgeable of, so my apologies there. But it's typically at least one academic year. But with that in mind, once the academic year ends, students are oftentimes allowed to do summer internships if they can connect it, again, to academic experiences. So explore whether or not you have summer internship classes, or could you have international students do summer internships, but then connect it to fall enrollment for an internship class that you help coordinate, something like that. So just learn a little bit, whether that's with your academic unit partners, your faculty, your other, campus partners. Try to learn what options you have so that you can direct your students to things that make sense for them and will give them the type of experience that will help them get into the field. And last but not least, just, we're never full experts on this, but if you see like a lot of like phishing things going around campus, or if you hear about scams, or if one of your students come in and mentions something about like, oh yeah, my bank tried to call me for my social security number. If you hear anything, just as the university might already do, share those reminders to students, because again, some of our international students with more limited, generally speaking, more limited exposure to, culture within the United States, they may not be able to pick up on some of those red flags and trends that staff and other colleagues may be able to do. So just trying to remind students that, hey, if something seems off, ask us first. Ask your colleagues, ask your peers. Like, don't just blindly make progress into things that doesn't seem to be right. And now students' ability to judge that might vary depending on the student, but it's always good to offer those reminders, especially at orientation, just saying, hey, if something comes up and something doesn't feel right, ask us for help as best we can. Oh, thanks, Sam. That's a great resource right there, that link in the chat. Thank you. But also, I put this in red just so we can flag it. Really try not to tell students, yes, this is the only answer, or this is exactly what you need to know, this is the exact status, because unless it's something that you control, unless it's something that your unit specifically has authority over, we are not the authorities for students for this. So make sure that you are working with your campus networks, your other offices, your other institutions, and other people that you naturally collaborate with, and don't just have students only use your voice as gospel. Unless you, of course, are in one of those university units that does that work on a daily basis and you are the campus experts on that, don't get in the habit of telling students that this is exactly how you do it, because things change. And it's usually outside of our scope of responsibilities. And if they change, you want to make sure, hey, this is what I typically have done. But before you submit anything, check in with blank, right? It's always good to have that as an extra layer of of capturing that safety for students. That was the majority of the content we wanted to talk about. Obviously, there are so many different institutional contexts, individual student scenarios, things that we could talk about, but we wanted to open up the floor to our attendees. Is there anything that you folks wanted to hear today that you didn't get a chance to hear? Or are there, examples from your institution that you think others might want to know? Please feel free to use the chat or unmute yourself. Does anybody have any questions, either for the panelists or for our full group? Well, as we're waiting for some questions to come in, panelists, Michelle, Rachel, or CJ, is there anything that kind of came to mind during our conversation, or anything else you want to add beyond what we already shared? I see a question coming in from Rachel, but is there anything as we digest that you want to speak to?
Well, just to hit on to follow up with or to address Rachel's question, yes, we do have an internship requirement here at the School of Public Policy. Students are required to submit or complete a 240-hour what we would say policy-related internship. A third of our students go into public service, but a third of our students go into the private sector, and another third go into the nonprofit space. And so, yes, there is support for our students because our students are graduating and not just going into public service, but also recognizing the cross-sector leadership aspect of our degree. So yes, there's opportunities for those students to do nonprofit work, private sector work. And so those internships are viable options for our F1 international students.
Adding on to that answer. Oh, go ahead, Rachel, you go first.
Sure. I was just going to say, we're a little bit of an anomaly at NYU Wagner. We don't have a specific internship requirement, but what we have is called the professional experience requirement. So if students come in with fewer than 2 years of full-time degree relevant experience, they have to do what we call the professional experience requirement, which is they have to get an internship or they have to have a, like robust volunteer opportunity, like sitting on a community board or a nonprofit board. Some of them can't leave their current full-time job. So we work with them to develop stretch projects because we want them to have things on their resume that are directly relevant to the degree so that they're, obviously, so that they're competitive for employers afterwards. So ours takes somewhat of a different shape. Few of our students go into government. I think we have about 4% who would go into the federal government, maybe 11 to 15% in state and local. Most of our students go into nonprofit and NGOs. And we've seen an uptick recently in private sector where people are interested in corporate social responsibility, ESG, and we have an urban planning program that drives a lot of our private sector work. So just another take. I'll put a link to our PER information in the chat in case people are curious.
Thanks, Rachel. Michelle, did you have anything to add? I had an answer to Rachel's question, but I wanted to give the floor to you too.
Yeah, just real quickly, the O'Neill School's approach is kind of a nice hybrid between Wagner and the School of Public Policy at Pepperdine. So we also have an experiential requirement, is how we refer to it, which can be completed via prior professional experience in lieu of doing an internship. But if the student doesn't have at least 2 years of professional experience, like at NYU, we do require that they do an internship. But similarly, to what my colleagues have shared, we see that our students go into a myriad of different types of careers that aren't exclusive to government-related positions. We do see a lot that go into the private sector, a lot that go into consulting, a lot that go into contracting, a lot that, go into nonprofits and NGOs and those types of things. So because of the breadth of the types of positions that our students go into and the types of internship opportunities that they have, we do offer support for students that know that they can't come out of the program into a U.S. government-related position.
I'll add a little bit of an answer to Rachel's question, and we'll pivot, and this will naturally pivot into Suzanne's question about OPT as well. I think a lot of it too also is determined by your institution's access or lack thereof of STEM OPT certification. Now, optional practical training is typically a work authorization for up to 1 year post-graduation for our F1 visa students, and that starts within 60 days of their graduation date. Students have to apply for that months in advance. It takes quite some time. I can only imagine what it's been like now with the federal government shutdown recently. So, that notwithstanding, it takes upwards of a couple of months to go through the process. And that was a few years ago when I was doing this a lot more frequently. But in that process, students only have 1 year of work experience unless they have the ability to have what are annual STEM OPT extensions. So you can total up to 3 total years of OPT. That is not very typical in public service and public administration programs, only because the way that the SIP codes, and we're getting really in the weeds here, but the SIP codes for academic programs are what dictate what are eligible and not eligible for STEM extensions. And unless you have a public policy program that's really heavy on the quantitative side, which is possible, or some MPAs do as well, you might be able to either have academic concentrations or full programs have that extension. We did explore that at our institution, and because our MPA is so drastically different from any other STEM-based OPT program at the university that has mostly to do with either economics or business, there's enough difference there that we would have to basically really fudge any sort of work with our Office of Higher Education in the state to get a SIP code change to allow for STEM OPT. So with that in mind, you have to also recognize the messaging to students has to be very upfront in the beginning, saying, hey, this program is not STEM OPT certified, so you may only have 1 year of work authorization in the United States. That doesn't take anything away from the value of the students' learning opportunities, but that may be a factor in whether or not students ultimately attend your institution and may impact their likelihood of finding placement. Getting to Suzanne's question, I admittedly, with the small amount of international students, my program in particular supports the majority of the students that have recently graduated have gone on to other education, essentially taking their I-20 and their any sort of education expansion and moving that to another institution, either another academic program within UConn or somewhere else. Maybe going to PhD programs, maybe another master's program that is STEM OPT certified. That doesn't necessarily help the student longer term in terms of our hope that they get into career in public service. But if it's ultimately what they need to do, then we'll support them in doing that. But most of the students I've worked with recently have not gone through OPT application processes because they've decided to go an academic route to extend their time before they make that ultimate decision. And some of our students that do travel to the institution are intending from the start to go right back to wherever they might be coming from or where they might be living, even if it's not their home country, so to say, prior to joining, because they have an intention. They're being, sponsored by their employer or something to that effect. So if that's the case, we have less concerns about those students going through the OPT processes, but we still offer them that. But admittedly, I have not done much. Do CJ, Rachel, probably more of a Rachel question here, but have you done any sort of support of students on that OPT front? I know it's not the main focus of the day, but do you have any content there on the OPT side?
Yeah, absolutely. So Wagner has a bunch of programs, and we only have one program that has STEM OPT, and it's our smallest program. It's only 10 students about per year. So the majority of our students are looking at 12 months of OPT. From day one, we emphasize the global job search. So we're going to talk about all of your options. And students will come and say, I want sponsorship, I want to stay, I want OPT. We say, that's great. And also, what is plan B? Let's talk about home country options, third country options. So we will support students in all of their goals, but we are very clear that OPT is a challenging process. The current political climate is very difficult for international students, and they know this, right? And all your students know this, and they'll still come to you and say, okay, but what do I do? How am I the one person who gets the H-1B this year from NYU Wagner? And so, we try to meet everybody where they are, and we try to be as supportive as possible, but we are also very realistic. And we say, well, let's look at how many people got H-1Bs this year, and which schools did they come from? And, what does that tell us? And what else feels exciting to you right now? What else are you thinking about? So we're never going to deter anyone, and we're never going to stop anyone, but we're going to present all of the information as accurately as possible to help manage expectations.
Thank you. Let's see what else we have here. Oh, thank you for folks for the professional requirements. One other example to offer some flexibility, and Michelle alluded to this too, and I don't know if this directly answers any questions, but talking about the idea of flexibility for students. When I was with the School of Business at my institution, one way that we helped international students increase the flexibility of what they're trying to do for academics was to allow for a non-credit experiential learning milestone. That was really clunky on the degree audit and graduation paperwork side, but essentially we had to allow students that so they could do internships over the summer and not register for summer-based internship requirements. That way they could do an internship over the summer, and then if they wanted, they would return in the fall term. We would have them register for the internship credits. I would do some check-ins and communication with those students while they were at their internship sites for supervisor evaluations, reflective activities, what we would normally be doing during the fall semester, but planning to do that based on CPT approvals. And the verification of that was essentially proving that a student had a fall course for the summer experience. So just, there can be some kind of more creative ways. If you were to add something like that to your program that's not already currently within your graduate catalog, or however your institution might dictate your program rules and policies, those typically are a long and cumbersome process. You know, I have to go through faculty committees, and that has to go to a university-wide thing. We call it GPAR at UConn. I'm sure everyone else has their own acronyms for that process. But if that is something that could enable more students to have some more flexibility on the career front and ultimately better serve international students, and you see traction from students, or you want to increase your enrollment from international students, that might be something to explore as well. Just so that way you don't have to further restrict student career opportunities to only fall or only spring semesters, because while some major employers have semesterly based programs, we see a lot more flexibility in the summer, and students are also able to fully immerse themselves in that opportunity and not balance between class, everything in life, and their internships. Sometimes trying to create more summer flexibility can really be helpful for all parties as well. I saw another question or two come in. What do we got here?
Ryan, I was just going to follow up too. At SPP, we actually required our students to do the internship this summer between their first and the second year. We're a 2-year program. We actually didn't give them flexibility to do it outside of that until COVID. And then once COVID hit, and we've maintained that flexibility, they can actually do it during the fall and the spring semester, just not their first semester in the program. But our internships is 0-unit course. They don't get charged tuition for, but it's a formal course they need to be enrolled in. So that's really the summer, because a lot of our students will do their internships abroad, even F1 students. So they might go back to their home country, or but yeah, we get a fair amount of our just domestic students that go abroad. So that's kind of how it's worked out here with us.
Thank you. All right. So I know we're at 1:50. We do have more time. So I wanted to say, is there anything, other questions that some of our folks might have here? Is there anything else that we could discuss that might be of interest? Do you have any other campus examples of things you want to share? Please feel free to use the chat. You're welcome to raise your hand, unmute yourself, anything like that. We're happy to use the final few remaining minutes we have here.
Ryan,
Well,
can I
yeah,
ask a
please.
question?
Yeah.
So this is something that came up in discussion, and I'm actually really curious to hear from people on the call. Do you publish any of your materials, whether career services, student group information? Do you publish anything and distribute it in languages other than English? We're having a discussion about this right now. Some of our student groups requested some materials in Mandarin. Our biggest population of international students is our Chinese students. And there's an interesting conversation happening about, we are, we all of our curriculum, all of our programming is done in English. What would it mean to have some supplemental materials in other languages? And I'd be curious, you can share in the chat or, come off mute. But curious about other people's take on this. And if you do that, how is it, who's the arbiter of that? Like, who decides what gets published in what languages?
And I don't know, Rachel, if other people are kind of thinking about that, but an interesting example, I think, that kind of adds some context to that too. Right now, we publish everything in English, right? Our institution has
Right.
rules, whereas and some of you folks are probably familiar with this, where certain international students coming in may not have to take TOEFL exams if their language of instruction was English or a certain
Right.
threshold of that. So there's certain things that students probably there are language acquisition thresholds and competency thresholds to be able to study at our institutions most likely. But beyond that, even if you meet those criteria, sometimes students will need supplemental assistance, right? So I don't know, even if you don't publish things in alternative languages, are there university programs that may be able to support students to better prepare them while they're in the program? So as an example, I know at UConn we have, I cannot remember the details of the acronym off the top of my head, but it's UKLE, and it's a program focused on allowing students that English is not their first language to be able to get conversational partners and learn better written and reading and spoken English to help them supplement that. Sometimes we've had students who've come to our programs during orientation realize, oh, I technically am above the minimum threshold, but I don't know if this is actually going to be very successful. And then they would pivot into that kind of English language type of program and then return to the academics. So right now, most of what we do is only supplemental and is designed to be an option, as not so much as something that we adequately pursue, but with an eye towards equity and trying to pull in students. I think it would be interesting to explore alternative languages, but then when students are getting here, what kind of like impact might that have on their expectation of current student support? Because I know our institution doesn't have translation software or resources, and our students, when they've
Yeah.
requested that, I've had to tap in faculty who happen to speak or being from a
Right.
similar region who can speak that language, and that does not feel good from my side, being like, hey, I can't help you, but I have a faculty member who's volunteering their time to help. That just makes me feel a little icky and very, very much like a dumb American, to be frank, who often might only be speaking English. So that's for me is some things that I consider too, outside of just
Very,
publication.
very interesting. Thank you. And there's a couple comments in the chat too. Rachel points out that uh, we have the English language proficiency requirement for admissions. And so we should be, there's an expectation um, to have that proficiency throughout the whole program. And then Laura pointed out that they bring in an immigration attorney who speaks Mandarin and have used WeChat in Mandarin for certain announcements. Laura, that's really interesting because we're talking right now about potential use of WeChat, but it has to go through IT, global privacy, and like several other layers at NYU before we can even launch something. So it's helpful to get the multiple perspectives.
Right. Any other thoughts on offering services or resources in other languages or any open questions? Because if not, I have a few things to plug and then we can give everyone a few moments back of their afternoon. Any other final questions or thoughts? Once, going twice, and without anything, I just want to put in a couple of plugs. So again, thank you to NASPAA for giving our Student Services Committee this opportunity to present today. We'll be doing more sessions like this throughout the next few semesters. We're planning some things for the spring right now. We have a committee meeting next week. So keep an eye out for future opportunities of interest. Also, if any of you do career services work and you have any interest, our virtual NASPAA Career Professionals Conference is coming up in mid-December. That's Thursday, December 11th and Friday, December 12th. We encourage you to take a look at that. We'll try to put some sort of plug about that in our recap email, but you can easily find it online in NASPAA's events. It's 12 to 3 p.m. Eastern Standard on both that Thursday and Friday. A few of the folks that are on this call will be there. So I hope if you have any interest in that, let us know. But other than that, thank you for your time, for your consideration. Thank you to our panelists, Michelle, Rachel, CJ. I appreciate your time, folks. Other than that, I think we are all set. You don't have to go home, but you don't have to stay here either. We appreciate your time and thank you so much for joining us today. And we'll be in touch with a recording follow-up and some of our slideshows later on as well. So thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm going to pause the recording and stop it.